Life constantly throws situations at us, some pleasant, others unexpected, and many downright frustrating. A delayed flight, a harsh comment from a colleague, a disagreement at home, or even the endless traffic jam when you're already late. These moments test not only our patience, but also our emotional intelligence. And in those moments, we are faced with a choice to react impulsively or to respond thoughtfully. Reacting is automatic. It's driven by impulse, emotion, and often ego. When we react, we give away our power to the situation or to the other person. We may raise our voice, send that angry text, or say words we can't take back. A reaction might feel satisfying in the moment, but it often leaves regret in its wake. Responding, on the other hand, requires awareness. It asks us to pause, to breathe, and to think before acting. Responding is intentional. It's choosing our words and actions based on values, not impulses. Responding allows us to handle challenges with grace, maintain self-respect, and nurture healthier relationships. Think about it. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your immediate reaction might be anger, maybe even shouting at someone who can't hear you. But if you respond, you remind yourself, maybe they're rushing to the hospital, maybe they're having a bad day. Suddenly, the anger dissolves, and you reclaim your peace. The difference between reacting and responding is the pause, that tiny gap between stimulus and action. Viktor Frankl once said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So, how do we master the art of responding? Pause and breathe. Give yourself a moment. A single deep breath can prevent 1,000 regrets. Observe your emotions. Choose words aligned with your values. Respond in a way that reflects the person you aspire to be, not just the emotion you feel. When we respond instead of react, we step into maturity, wisdom, and strength. We become less like a puppet pulled by strings of circumstance and more like the author of our own story. So the next time life presses your buttons, remember, you always have a choice. Reacting may feel easy, but responding is powerful. Responding turns conflict into connection, chaos into... In those moments, it's easy to let our instincts take over. That instinctive action is what we call reaction. But if we pause, reflect, and choose our next step with intention, that's response. Though the two may seem similar, the difference between them can define our relationships, our inner peace, and even the direction of our lives. A reaction is immediate. It's fast, automatic, and often unfiltered. Think about touching a hot stove. You instantly pull your hand away. That kind of reaction is useful for survival. But when applied to communication, relationships, or decision-making, reactions can often cause harm. For example, when someone criticizes us, our natural reaction might be to get defensive, to snap back, or to shut down emotionally. While it may feel satisfying in the moment, the long-term result is usually regret, misunderstanding, or conflict. On the other hand, a response is deliberate. It comes after awareness, reflection, and consideration of consequences. A response is not about suppressing emotions, but about directing them wisely. Imagine the same scenario. Someone criticizes you. Instead of lashing out, you take a breath, acknowledge your feelings, and then respond with curiosity or calmness. I hear your concern. Can you explain more? That shift transforms a potential conflict into an opportunity for connection. The real difference between reacting and responding lies in control. When we react, the situation controls us. Our emotions dictate our words and actions, but when we respond, we take back that control. We decide how we want to show up in that moment, regardless of the trigger. Psychologists often describe reactions as ego-driven and responses as value-driven. A reaction protects the ego it tries to win, defend, or prove. A response, however, protects what truly matters: our peace, our integrity, and our relationships. By responding, we move beyond short-term impulses and align our actions with long-term values. Consider two leaders faced with a crisis. One reacts in panic, yelling at the team, blaming others, and making rushed decisions. The other pauses, gathers facts, and calmly guides the team through solutions. The difference isn't in the crisis itself, it's in how each leader chose to handle it. One was controlled by emotion, the other led with intention. This distinction applies to everyday life as well. In families, reacting can lead to arguments over small issues, while responding builds trust and understanding. In workplaces, reactions can damage teamwork, while responses foster respect and collaboration. Even in our personal well-being, reacting to stress with unhealthy habits, like overeating, snapping at loved ones, or withdrawing, can hurt us. But responding with mindful practices, like journaling, exercising, or simply breathing, nurtures resilience and growth. Learning the art of responding instead of reacting is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally intelligent. It's about recognizing that our first impulse doesn't always serve us, and that the power of choice always exists. When we understand this difference deeply, we start to see every challenge as an opportunity. Each trigger becomes a chance to practice self-mastery, and in that mastery lies not just stronger relationships, but a calmer, wiser, and more grounded version of ourselves. So, the critical difference between reacting and responding isn't just about behavior, it's about empowerment. Reactions make us slaves to circumstances. Responses make us authors of our own story. The power of the pause in our fast-paced world, everything demands immediacy. Emails ask for instant replies, conversations often pressure us into quick responses, and stressful situations seem to push us into knee-jerk actions. Yet, the most powerful tool we have in those moments is something incredibly simple: the pause. The pause is that brief space between what happens to us and what we choose to do about it. It might only be a second or two, but in that small window lies the difference between reacting impulsively and responding wisely. Why is the pause so powerful? Because it interrupts the chain reaction of emotion. When we are triggered by anger, fear, or frustration, our brain activates the fight or flight response. Blood rushes to the parts of the brain designed for survival, not rational thinking. If we act immediately, our words or actions often mirror that raw, unfiltered emotion. The result: harsh words spoken, poor decisions made, and regrets left behind. But when we pause, even for a breath, we give our brain time to re-engage its higher functions, the part that considers consequences, values, and long-term goals. In that pause, we shift from survival mode to intentional living. Think of it like this: if emotions are waves crashing at the shore, the pause is the lifeboat that keeps us from being swept away. Instead of drowning in the wave of anger or fear, we step back, observe it, and then decide whether to ride it, wait it out, or let it pass. The beauty of the pause is that it doesn't require grand gestures. It can be as simple as taking a deep breath before replying to an offensive comment, counting to 3 before hitting send on that heated email, closing your eyes for a moment before making an important decision. These micro pauses create macro changes in the way we live and relate to others. Consider a workplace example. A manager receives bad news about a delayed project. A reactive leader might lash out, blame the team, and create tension. But a leader who pauses might take a breath, gather their thoughts, and then respond with clarity. Okay, this is a challenge. Let's focus on how we can adjust timelines and solutions. The pause doesn't erase the problem, but it changes the energy in the room, and often that makes all the difference. In personal relationships, too, the pause is transformative. Arguments often escalate not because of the original issue, but because both people react without stopping. A pause, stepping away for a moment, breathing deeply, or even saying, "I need a minute before I answer," can prevent words from turning into weapons. That small moment of silence becomes an act of love, respect, and maturity. The pause also nurtures self-awareness. It allows us to ask ourselves powerful questions. What am I feeling right now? Why am I triggered? What outcome do I want? By creating space, we shift from being controlled by emotion to being guided by wisdom. And here's the secret: the more we practice pausing, the easier it becomes. At first, it might feel unnatural to hold back when everything inside you wants to fire off a reaction. But over time, the pause becomes a natural part of our rhythm. It becomes a muscle of self-control that strengthens with use. In a world that glorifies speed, the pause is revolutionary. It teaches us that slowing down doesn't mean weakness. It means power, power over our words, power over our emotions, power over how we show up in the world. So, the next time you feel triggered, remember, the pause is not empty. It's full of wisdom, clarity, and choice. In that tiny space, you hold the power to transform conflict into peace, mistakes into lessons, and reactions into thoughtful responses. The pause may be short in time, but its impact can last a lifetime. Emotional awareness as the first step. If responding rather than reacting is an art, then emotional awareness is the canvas on which that art is painted. Without awareness of our emotions, we cannot hope to control them, let alone channel them into thoughtful responses. Emotional awareness is the very first step in mastering the way we engage with life's challenges. So, what exactly is emotional awareness? Simply put, it's the ability to recognize, identify, and understand what you are feeling in the moment. While that may sound easy, most of us live on autopilot. We often confuse emotions, suppress them, or let them explode without ever truly pausing to examine them. The problem with this is clear: if you cannot name it, you cannot manage it. Let's take an example. Imagine you're in a heated conversation, and suddenly your chest tightens, your voice rises, and you feel the urge to argue. At first glance, you may think you're angry, but if you pause and reflect, you might realize what you're really feeling is hurt, embarrassment, or fear of being misunderstood. Anger is just the mask those deeper emotions wear. By becoming aware of this distinction, you now have more clarity, and clarity is power. Emotional awareness matters because emotions are the drivers of behavior. When they remain hidden or misinterpreted, they hijack our reactions. But when they are acknowledged, they lose their grip. Awareness creates a gap between stimulus and response, a gap that allows us to choose wisely. Developing emotional awareness starts with slowing down and checking in with yourself. Ask simple but powerful questions like, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? Is this emotion about the present moment, or is it connected to something deeper from the past? Another key practice is labeling your emotions. Neuroscientists have found that simply putting a name to a feeling, like I feel anxious or I feel disrespected, actually reduces the intensity of that emotion. Naming it gives you distance from it, creating space for choice. Journaling is also a powerful tool for building emotional awareness. Writing down your triggers and responses over time reveals patterns. Maybe you react defensively to criticism, or maybe you get frustrated when plans change unexpectedly. Once you're aware of these patterns, you can prepare yourself to respond differently in the future. But emotional awareness isn't just about the self. It also extends to others. When you become skilled at identifying your own emotions, you also become more attuned to the emotions of those around you. This is the foundation of empathy. You begin to recognize that behind someone else's harsh words might be fear, stress, or insecurity, and when you see emotions more clearly, both yours and theirs, you are better equipped to respond with compassion rather than react with hostility. It's important to emphasize that emotional awareness does not mean suppressing feelings. In fact, it's the opposite. Suppression only pushes emotions underground, where they eventually resurface in more destructive ways. Awareness is about acknowledgement. It's about saying, I see you, I hear you, and I choose how to act in spite of you. The truth is, we cannot control every situation in life, but we can control our awareness of ourselves. And in that awareness, we find freedom. Emotional awareness doesn't erase challenges, but it gives us the tools to face them with clarity instead of chaos. In the journey of responding instead of reacting, emotional awareness is the foundation. Without it, we're like ships without a compass, tossed around by waves of emotion. With it, we can navigate life's storms with steadiness, wisdom, and grace. So, the next time you feel triggered, don't rush past the feeling. Stop, notice, name it. Because the moment you become aware of your emotions, you reclaim the power to direct your response, instead of being driven by reaction. Responding aligns with values, not ego when faced with challenges or conflict. Most of us instinctively want to defend ourselves, prove our point, or win the argument. This drive comes from the ego, the part of us that is concerned with image, control, and being right. Reacting is almost always ego-driven. It's about immediate self-protection, often at the cost of long-term peace or meaningful connection. Responding, however, comes from a deeper place. It is rooted in values, the principles that define who we are and how we want to show up in the world. While reactions often mirror our impulses, responses reflect our character. That is why responding rather than reacting aligns us with our higher selves. Consider a situation where someone insults you in public. Your ego screams for retaliation. How dare they? A reactive impulse might be to fire back with an even sharper insult. But what happens? The conflict escalates, your peace is disrupted, and later, you may regret losing control. Now imagine responding from values instead. If you value respect, you might calmly say, "I don't appreciate being spoken to that way," and walk away. If you value compassion, you might think, "This person must be hurting to lash out like that." The situation doesn't control you. You choose your response based on the kind of person you want to be. The ego lives in the present moment only. It wants instant gratification, immediate defense, and quick victories. Values, however, are long-term. They ask, what action here best reflects the life I want to live, the relationships I want to nurture, and the legacy I want to leave? When we align with values, we make choices that honor our true selves rather than momentary emotions. Let's take another example from leadership. A manager hears that a project has failed. A reactive ego-driven response would be anger, blame, or criticism. How could you let this happen? But a values-driven response might sound very different. This didn't go as planned. Let's learn from it and see how we can do better next time. The first response might damage trust, while the second builds resilience and growth. Both leaders face the same setback, but their choices reveal whether they are led by ego or by values. Aligning responses with values also fosters authenticity. When we react from ego, we often behave in ways that don't truly represent who we are later. We may feel guilt or shame. But when we respond from values, our actions align with our inner truth. This consistency between what we believe and how we behave creates integrity, and integrity builds trust with others and with ourselves. Of course, this alignment isn't always easy. In the heat of the moment, ego often shouts louder than values. That's why it requires practice and intentionality to pause, check in, and ask ourselves, am I acting from ego or values right now? What do I want to stand for in this moment? Will I be proud of this choice tomorrow? When we start asking these questions, our responses shift. Arguments become calmer, decisions become wiser, relationships become stronger. And perhaps most importantly, we begin to live in harmony with who we truly are, not just who we feel like being in the moment. Ultimately, the art of responding instead of reacting is not about silencing our ego completely. It's about putting it in its rightful place. The ego may alert us when we feel hurt, threatened, or disrespected, but values remind us how to act with dignity, courage, and kindness. When we choose responses rooted in values, we not only protect our peace, but also elevate the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us. That is the quiet power of values-driven living. It turns fleeting moments of conflict into lasting opportunities for growth. The transformative impact of responding when we make the conscious shift from reacting to responding, the changes ripple far beyond a single conversation or decision. Responding is not just a skill. It is a transformative practice that reshapes our relationships, strengthens our inner peace, and redefines how we engage with the world. At its core, a reaction is survival-based. It helps us defend, attack, or escape. But life is not a battlefield where every disagreement requires a fight. If we live only through reactions, our days are filled with tension, misunderstandings, and regret. Responding, however, is growth-based. It allows us to rise above immediate impulses and see the bigger picture. And when we consistently choose to respond rather than react, transformation begins. The first area of transformation is within ourselves. Responding cultivates self-mastery. Each time we pause and choose a thoughtful response, we strengthen our ability to manage emotions rather than be managed by them. Over time, this builds resilience. Stressful moments no longer feel like uncontrollable storms. We learn to navigate them with steadiness. We begin to trust ourselves more, knowing we won't sabotage our peace with reckless words or hasty decisions. This inner confidence is liberating. It allows us to face challenges with clarity, not chaos. The second transformation unfolds in our relationships. Most conflicts don't arise from issues themselves, but from how we react to them. Harsh words, defensive tones, or impulsive decisions often damage trust. Responding changes that dynamic. When we choose to listen instead of argue, clarify instead of assume, and empathize instead of attack, relationships flourish. Misunderstandings shrink and connection deepens. Responding doesn't mean avoiding honesty. It means delivering it with respect, and respect is the foundation of trust, whether in families, friendships, or workplaces. Responding also transforms communication. A reactive conversation often escalates. Voices rise, emotions boil, and neither side truly listens. But a responsive conversation creates space for dialogue. For example, instead of saying, "You never listen to me," a reactive attack, a responsive approach might be, "I feel unheard when I talk. Can we slow down and try again?" The content is similar, but the delivery changes everything. What could have been an argument now becomes an opportunity for understanding. The third transformation lies in leadership and influence. People naturally follow those who can remain calm under pressure. A leader who reacts in anger creates fear and resistance. A leader who responds with composure inspires trust and loyalty. This principle applies not only to managers and executives, but to anyone in a position of influence: parents, teachers, mentors, and even friends. Responding builds credibility because it shows maturity, thoughtfulness, and reliability. Finally, responding transforms our perspective on life itself. When we react, we live in constant reactivity, always at the mercy of circumstances. But when we respond, we reclaim authorship of our lives. Challenges are no longer just obstacles. They become opportunities to practice patience, compassion, and wisdom. Each pause becomes a doorway to growth. Over time, life feels less like a series of battles and more like a series of lessons. It's important to recognize that this transformation doesn't happen overnight. Responding is a practice, and like any practice, it requires awareness and repetition. At first, we may slip into reactions and only realize afterward what we could have done differently. But with consistency, we learn to catch ourselves sooner. Eventually, responding becomes our natural way of being. The transformative impact of responding is not just external. It changes who we are at the deepest level. We move from being controlled by emotions to being guided by wisdom. We become less reactive, more intentional, and ultimately more at peace. And when individuals transform in this way, so do families, workplaces, and communities. In the end, the art of responding is not about perfection. It's about progress. Every moment we choose a response over a reaction, we take a step toward becoming calmer, kinder, and stronger versions of ourselves. That is the true power of this practice. It doesn't just change moments, it changes lives. We live in a world that constantly challenges us through unexpected setbacks, frustrating encounters, and emotional triggers. In these moments, we are given a choice to react impulsively or to respond intentionally. That choice may seem small, but it carries profound consequences. When we react, we hand over our power to circumstances. We let anger, fear, or ego dictate our words and actions. But when we respond, we reclaim them. We choose to act from awareness, from values, and from the kind of person we aspire to be. We've seen how the difference between reaction and response can change the course of relationships, conversations, and even our inner peace. We've explored the pause, the sacred space that gives us room to breathe, reflect, and act wisely. We've learned that emotional awareness is the foundation, that values must guide us rather than ego, and that when we respond consistently, transformation takes place within ourselves, in our relationships, and in the world around us. The truth is, none of us will get it perfect every time. We are human, and emotions are powerful. But every pause we take, every moment we choose response over reaction, is a step toward greater strength, clarity, and peace. So the next time someone pushes your buttons or life throws you into chaos, remember this. You don't have to give away your power. You have a choice. In that choice lies your freedom. Reacting is ordinary. Responding is extraordinary. And the art of responding, not reacting, is the path to becoming your most calm, compassionate, and empowered self. Thank you